So for our spline, you need something that's rigid and yet bendable. If you're using something that's not too curved, you can use a ruler like I have here because it flexes, but it's kind of hard to do. So for something like this, that's probably okay because our boat's not going to curve much more than, say, that. I mean, that's an extreme curve. So this would be fine. If you've got a tighter curve or you don't have one of those nice handy long rulers, you can simply cut a strip of cardboard. This, as you can see, is rigid enough, but it still flexes. So this will be our spline that we're going to use to trace this curve. Now the way that we do this is actually quite simple. At each of these marks on your fishbone here, we're going to go put a pin. Get some sewing pins or some fine, maybe like 18 gauge or smaller nails, and pin them in right here at these orange tick marks. You want to bend it this way. It wants to flex back this way. So we're going to pin it in between two sets. So this first edge that you just outlined will be the line that you're actually going to trace on. So we're going to find the center of our spline, and we're going to start in the middle of our boat and work our way out towards each end at the same time. This way we have a nice symmetric bend and everything stays orderly. So you take the center of your spline and you butt it right up against one of those pins right here in the middle at your wide beam. Then you take another pin and pin it into the cardboard on the back side of the spline. Now that will hold this in place. As you bend this around to touch your next pin, then you do the same thing and put another pin behind your spline to hold it. Then you bend it around a little bit more till it touches your next pin, and so on. Each time you contact a pin, you put another one behind it. You do the same thing on this side. Now, the one thing here is you need to be touching 3 points at any one time. As this comes along here, I've only got a 4-foot piece of spline here, so I can't go beyond this. Well, as it gets to here, I'm only going to be able to pin these 5 spots. So I don't have a reliable curve because my cardboard here doesn't know where the next point's going to be. So I can't reliably trace this segment here because I don't have a support for the next segment. So I would lay my piece here, and all I could trace reliably with this would be this center 2-foot section here. Then I would move my spline down, and I still have to have a support on the back side. So really, with a 4-foot spline and 1-foot spaced pins, you could only trace the center 2 feet at any one time. So keep that in mind. So you just got to keep scooting your spline on down. Now, of course, if you had a longer spline, that's not an issue. But make sure that you don't trace beyond the center of what you're supporting. Remember, you have to have one extra support beyond each side of whatever segment you're tracing so that it can actually catch that curve. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a straight line segment in one of these sections, and that would be bad because we want the smoothest curve possible, and doing the spline this way will allow you to get that. In fact, if you want a shortcut, you can do this. Once you spline the center section and cut out one of these sections, you can then really just flip this over and do this, and you don't have to spline this other section. To kind of help explain the spline problem, I've got this close-up diagram of what's going on over here in our little fishbone. We've got our pins or nails on the inside curve. You've got the cardboard here represented by the brown. Here, you've got the curve that you're trying to follow here in dashed brown at both ends. Well, in orange here, you've got the part of the cardboard that doesn't know what's coming next. So the second the cardboard leaves this last set of pins, it's going to just be straight for this last segment because it doesn't know to curve. So what we'll do is we'll trace along the inside edge of this and the inside edge of this. You can't trace this segment yet because its next segment doesn't have any support. You can't trace here for the same reason. If you try to trace here, what's going to happen when you actually go to move your spline is this segment here is going to move a little bit. So you can't trace that yet. You can only trace inside supported section. I hope that helps explain that part a little bit, because I'd hate for you to trace this section here, go to move your spline, and then all of a sudden now your line in here that you traced a second ago is wrong. Once you have this, go ahead and cut on your lines that you traced. Okay, so you've cut out your pieces. You've got a bow, a center, and a stern section. Great. You're only one layer thick at this point. Since we're going to keep it simple, we're not making any honeycomb panels or anything like that. It's just going to be straight up sandwiches. We're going to need to thicken these up a little bit. But remember, we always want our seams to be strong and to overlap. If you have the area to build a 12-foot boat all at once, this is the time to go ahead and do it. We're also now going to go ahead and use these as patterns. So we're going to lay these back over here on our cardboard like this, I guess for efficient use of space. Trace around them and cut those out. That's going to give you another set of identical pieces. Okay, that's great. If you stack these up, you're going to have seams here with nothing connecting them. So we have to make a center section. Generally, a 3-layer bottom is plenty good for a simple boat. So we're not going to do anything more than that. It also, if you remember from one of my other videos, you need to have an odd number of sections for any sort of sandwich to cancel out any bending tendency. So 3 is also the minimum number that you need for stability. For our center section, we got to make sure we have some overlap. You don't really need more than 6 inches of overlap, just because wood glue and construction adhesive is actually really good stuff. And so it's not, especially when you have this much contact area, it's really not going to pull apart too bad. So you're going to take 2 of your pieces, you're going to butt them back together, then you're going to measure here where your centerpiece ought to be. Now, if you have the cardboard to do it, I recommend just putting it dead center of your piece, like this, so you'd have a 4-foot section there. That then does create a seam right here in the middle of your boat. This panel here, of course, is going in the center of our sandwich. I always go for a minimum number of joints. But you could do anything. You could offset it just a tad bit and then have one hanging, but it doesn't matter. So let's just go ahead and say that. Make a mark on there. Butt these 2 together. Put this piece then back over on a sheet of cardboard. If you have any leftovers here or not, get a new sheet. Trace around this segment here and cut that out. Then shift your piece to cut a piece for here, here, and the other end as well. Once you cut your first 3 pieces, we use those for patterns for everything. If you have enough cardboard, I recommend never building with those pieces so that you always have 3 patterns and you never have to recut stuff. So here you can see how this is all going to go together. I've tried to draw, a sort of perspective view of how this is all going to flow together, but you should be able to see we've got our 3 pieces here that we started with that are not our patterns. We have another identical set of these off to the side somewhere that we're going to use to then trace other pieces later if we need to. But you see, you just lay it down like this. Now I've drawn gaps here for clarity, but of course there are no gaps. We butt these right against each other. So the way we're going to assemble this first piece here on the bottom, we're going to run construction adhesive, which is the stuff in the caulking gun. We're going to run that the full length inside the ends of the corrugations of the cardboard. This is going to help plug that gap. Construction adhesive is really nice because it does double duty and acts sort of as caulking and glue. So that's really good. So we're going to do this on a flat surface, caulk those. We're going to then use Titebond 2 because it's a lot thinner than construction adhesive. It'll allow for a nice flat sheet. We'll use a stipple pattern all over here. Then we're going to lay down our tail section of the blue. We'll run construction adhesive inside it. We'll lay down our next section of blue. Another thing of construction adhesive, blue, construction adhesive, blue. Then very quickly, we're going to put in our top layer. Once again, we'll put our stipple pattern of glue all over the blue. We'll lay down one section. We'll run construction adhesive inside the corrugations here in this gap. We'll lay down the center, construction adhesive, lay down the center. So you'll end up with a 3-ply sandwich that looks like this, that has construction adhesive in all of these points here. Now I drew these with gaps for clarity, but of course these are going to be butted right next to each other so that the glue will actually probably kind of squeeze out a little bit. Make sure this is on a flat surface. Lay a bunch of books or something else heavy and flat on top of this so it doesn't want to warp while it dries. And that's all there is to building the bottom of our boat.